Thief the Dark Project is one of the most influential and one of the most important games in general when it came to the video game industry back of 1998. And the reason why is a lot of people weren't really quite expecting for this game to sell. And it sold over, I would say, to be a rough guesstimate, over 1.6 million units. Now, like I say, it's just a guesstimate, and the reason why I was guessing that is because I'm sure that this game has sold more than that, but point being is that the reason why I say that it was one of the most influential games of its time, because it really initially was. And this game was a very interesting game as it is as well, too, because not just because of what this game does or what it entails. It has to do with, more importantly, there was a very unique thing that they added in a game like this. It was a very interesting way of knowing where sound is coming from. They did a very unique soundscape to where whenever Garrett is walking, the protagonist that you play in this game, whether if you're walking on a rug, it's quieter. You're not going to make as much noise. When you're basically walking on a higher walking area, like marble or glass or tile, it's going to make a higher pitched sound, and that sound is going to reverberate around in that specific type of area. And that's pretty much what they did. And what that does is that sound is going to reverberate not just from the tile, it's going to reverberate through like a certain type of a wall, of a hallway, or anything where it's going to reverberate from. And that's what makes this game very much unique of a stealth game as it is, and in general, of why this game was one of the most anticipated and most beloved franchise known to the video game industry. Now, what I really want to talk about this game in general as well is its stealth mechanics, other than its soundscape. You play as Garrett, like I previously mentioned, and you basically, what you already are. You're a master thief. You play as a master thief, and he goes around stealing stuff. Basically, this game also takes place in a somewhat of a pseudo magic Victorian type of steampunkish type of world, and that's another thing. What really makes this game really unsettling in a certain way, but it does it really well in terms of its storytelling and its sound, and the way how this game just really makes it more different from that of any other stealth mechanic type of game out there, like Tenchu Stealth Assassins, or Assassin's Creed, because we didn't have Assassin's Creed until like 2007. I'm just putting my little thought in there, or idea. So what I want to do is that I really want to talk about why this game was not just one of the most influential games in the market of the video game industry back in 1998, is the fact that, you were able to do a lot of certain types of different things that you normally couldn't really do in that time of any kind of stealth games that you can play in general. Metal Gear Solid didn't have what this game does. You can knock enemies out in that game, but however, in Thief the Dark Project, you were able to knock out enemies with a blackjack. A blackjack is one of the most not anticipated. That's wrong. Is one of the most exclusive weapons in the game, to where you can knock out enemies rather than killing them. Yes, you can kill your enemies in this game, but I wouldn't highly recommend it, because you will eventually go into a specific combat scenario, and it's not one of the most fun things ever. I mean, believe me, I've tried it, I've done it, and it wasn't the most pleasant. So now, what I really want to talk about here, too, is I am going to try as best as I can to talk about this game as much as I can here.
But I've been thinking we should watch the
And so, this game is also based upon an engine called the Dark Engine. And they were able to do quite a bit with this engine, along with, its intricate lighting and attention to detail. And another thing that really made this game even really interesting as well, other than it being a stealth game in general, is the light bar. The light bar initially was not going to be produced or implemented in Thief the Dark in Thief the Dark Project. Oh my god, I can't talk today. They were going to do something entirely different before this game even got made. And then back in 1996, there was a game called Dark Camelot, and that was going to be an Arthurian world, steampunk-ish in a sort of way, where you're using nothing but swords, but it was going to be that of the same type of ilk of what the Dark Project was going to do in terms of its stealth mechanics and how you were able to get around on slinking by enemies rather than killing them or knocking them out. That's basically what that game was initially going to be. But they eventually ended up coming out with Thief the Dark Project. So they did a lot of changes. They did a lot of different implementations of what they wanted to do with that, and so they did. So I want to talk about a little bit about the mechanics of what made this game really interesting as well. Other than using the blackjack, you have your water arrows, which you were able to distinguish certain types of light, which are that of fire torches. That's really cool. They also had some really interesting arrows called the rope arrows. You were able to latch the rope arrows onto a specific type of platform or wooden space and climb up to where you can get specific types of goodies and vice versa. So there was a little bit of parkour element within the game, but not like very parkour to what Assassin's Creed does. But however, what made this game even more interesting though too, that of basically you're playing a little bit kind of like Batman. Batman has smoke bombs. You have all these different types of tools that you can do, especially when you're playing a stealth type of game or character, like Garrett is, right? So that makes sense. So now what I want to also discuss here is they did a lot of really interesting technological achievements, which made it more interesting in terms of, like I say, its lighting structure. It's not volumetric lighting, because this game didn't have any volumetric lighting. So my apologies on that. They also did, they introduced a light and sound system with the stealth gameplay mechanics in this game as well. As I previously mentioned, you were able to make certain types of sounds. Like I said, it was going to be able to reverberate around in a specific set type of area. That's another really cool thing. And they had a game called Thief 2014, which came out in 2014. That game had a lot of dumbed down type of issues. And what I mean by that game did not have any type of soundscape, none whatsoever. They really dumbed it down, and that really pissed me off. And, I literally wanted to like that game a lot. I played the game twice, but however, it just did not appeal to me from what the original series did. And they completely, and what I mean by dumbed down, they completely basically took out the whole entire soundscape system in Thief 2014. No, they really did. They actually really did do that. And I'm just like, why would you do something like this? Because, that's what made the original Thief game so successful. And that's what made them so good. Not just because of its environmental storytelling or its soundscape or the storytelling itself, like the main story of the game itself. And that's what made these games even more unique and robust in a very sort of different type of way. And I like that. And so I'm not going to talk about 2014 anymore, Thief, anyways. Basically, what it combined a little bit of a first-person shooter mechanic because, obviously you play Thief the Dark Project in a first-person mode. You can't switch between third-person and first-person, but you were able to do that with Thief Deadly Shadows. You don't switch third-person to first. So I thought I'd bear that in mind. They also had a little bit of a somewhat development type of hell in a sort of way, and their initial plans were going to be focused on stealth, and they eventually were able to do that with Thief the Dark Project. And then they want to basically have it to being a main focus on avoiding confrontation. So basically, this game, Thief the Dark Project, is more based on any types of evasion. You have suspicion and then high chaos in a sort of way, and that's what they pretty much did with this game. And I think that's what made this game even more interesting of that type of gameplay style. And it works because I really love the way how Thief the Dark Project was able to just maintain a good, proper balance on that. And I think that's one of the most important things, especially in a game like this, of that old school. And, I'm a very old school person myself. I do like the new stuff that we are getting today. But however, when it comes to old school games like Thief the Dark Project or Thief 2 or Thief Deadly Shadows or Quake or Doom and all that, I love the old school stuff. That's usually where it's at most of the time for me. Sometimes, but not all the time. But I'm just veering off topic and sharing my thoughts on that. But overall, basically, this game was a first-person sneaker, essentially. And so that's another thing I think a lot of people weren't really thinking that this game was going to sell. But when this game initially came out and released, it sold amazingly well. It sold very well. And hence the reason why they were able to make a sequel to it known as Thief 2 The Metal Age, which I believe came out in 2002. And then in 2004, they were able to make Thief Deadly Shadows. Thief 2 The Metal Age and Thief Deadly Shadows were made by Ion Storm or were picked up by Ion Storm because when Looking Glass Studios went defunct back in, I believe it was way before, it was after Thief or before Thief 2 The Metal Age came out, and all I can say is that I'm very sorry for this company because they did such an excellent and amazing job of what they wanted to do, and it shows. So now I would say the game was basically a commercial success. It was it was one of the most, like I said, it was a very heavy influence on in much later stealth games, like Tenchu Stealth Assassins. It was much more older school than this game, obviously. But, that game had a lot of influential on Thief the Dark Project and, much like Metal Gear Solid or any other games in general that were able to implement stealth mechanics in those games too. And so I think that's another thing why I really love this series as a whole. Not just of what these games do, but it's amazing what the story is like in these games. And what I love about these games in general, I really think that it's one of the most important things to know that, we do need stealth games like this again in this modern day of gaming, either if you're on PC or on console, because I believe that when it comes to stealth games in general or games that have stealth mechanics in them, sometimes they're not always going to be that great. But as far as Thief the Dark Project is concerned, or Thief 2 The Metal Age or Deadly Shadows, they just really had some really unique ways of implementing certain type of lighting and stealth mechanic in general. And I think that's what made these games so amazing. Sorry for that slight pause. And so, yeah, and that's why I love these games. Another thing I will discuss here, though, too, is the fact that it's the level intricacy design of this game. The level intricacy of Thief the Dark Project specific, other than Thief 2 or Deadly Shadows, is that when you further progress into the story, you'll have like a certain type of level to where the level is going to be like flipped around a little bit. You're not going to be. You'll still be able to maintain your first person focus, but you are able to. Like I say, the whole entire level is going to be flipped around, or sometimes it'll be like very cone shape in a way. You will be going into a certain level to where there's some water involved, and you have to go through some water areas in order to go to another part of that specific set level. And so the level design in this game is one of the best I've seen, other than it being an old school game. And I really think that they did an amazing job on that, though, too. And like I say, I have never seen level design like this before in the game. I mean, yes, granted that there have been games like the Metro series. They did some really good stealth mechanics in that series as well, but it's not as intricate as what Thief the Dark Project did. And like I say, it has to do with the soundscape. It has to do with the way how it just looks overall, and it's just interesting enough to know that it's amazing at what they were able to do with limited resources that they were able to do with this game when before it initially released, and it's amazing. I absolutely love this series, and what I will want to talk about here too as well is the fact that what I love about this series is that I would really love to see an HD remastered or some sort of remake for the consoles. Now, granted, I understand that they won't do it because these were PC exclusive, especially the first two. Thief Deadly Shadows came out for the original Xbox and PC back in 2004. And that one was actually pretty critically acclaimed though too. A lot of people really enjoyed it. Some people didn't. But however, I really think that when it comes to these games in general and what they did is these games have gone down in history, in video game history, known as one of the best action stealth games ever made or in general. Because like I say, there are other games now that we have now today or back in the day, the Metal Gear Solid, Tenchu, any other games that are that of the stealth ilk, basically, or the genre itself. And I just feel like that we need more games like this. I really do think that we need more games like this because there's a lot of emergent gameplay there. And I think that's another reason why I think the original Thief games really had a tumultuous advantage or influence on this genre. And like I said, it shows. Other than it being an old school game as it is, but it's amazing what a game series can do to achieve a better greatness of what you want to do and how you're going to be able to achieve it. And I think Thief the Dark Project in general did an amazing job. It really, really did. And I'm really, really hoping that they make other games like this in the not too distant future.
Thief 2: The Metal Age is a 2000 stealth video game developed by Looking Glass Studios and published by Eidos Interactive. Like its predecessor, Thief the Dark Project, the game follows Garrett, a master thief who works in and around a steampunk metropolis called the City. Thief 2 was designed to build on the foundation of its predecessor. In response to feedback from players of Thief, the team placed a heavy focus on urban stealth in the sequel, and they minimized the use of monsters and maze-like levels. The game was made with the third iteration of the Dark Engine, which had been used previously to develop Thief and System Shock 2. Now, there is one thing in particular I would like to put in here when it comes to Thief 2: The Metal Age, is that this game was not more than just heavily influenced from that of its predecessor. This game was absolutely amazing because of its setting as well. And what made this game so great and what it made so stand out from that of its original predecessor, The Dark Project, or known as Thief Gold, which was actually to implement 3 new missions. However, this game really provided the utmost of bringing more of a stealth assassin, or thief, basically, not assassin. And it's the reason why this game, or this game original series as a whole, was the most important and the most pinnacle games of its era, of its time in gaming history. And I think that's where the storytelling of the original Thief games, specifically from 1, 2, and Deadly Shadows, is that these games were able to provide a very good common narrative. It was based on the gameplay, it was based on the story, and it was based basically around the different types of factions. Like the pagans, like the Hemorites, and all these different types of factions that were able to really circumvent differentiate between Garrett and the keepers. Now, the keepers in the original series, from the first one to the Metal Age and the Deadly Shadows, they are a faction to where they really want to keep the peace, and they really want to be the focal point and the main focus, basically the main crux of the whole entire series as a whole. And I think that's where this game really utilized the keepers to its full potential, and how the keepers were able to go much further into detail in Thief Deadly Shadows. And I think that's where Thief the Dark Project really did a good emphasis on that. And from Thief to the Metal Age, and along with in Thief Deadly Shadows. And I think that's where Thief Deadly Shadows really provide more of the context of why I think these games were like the most important games in gaming history, because of everything, as I previously mentioned. It's fascinating to how far these games have come. And as I previously stated in my Thief 2014 video that I made not too long ago, was the fact that that game had the utilization in that game was so dumbed down from the original franchise. Because when it came to the original franchise, as you see here, from Thief the Dark Project to Thief to the Metal Age or Thief Deadly Shadows, is that these games really offered a unique system to where it's known as the sound mechanic system. It had to do with what kind of tools you were able to provide, whether if it's shooting arrows or walking on tile. It's a high noise. This sound mechanic is indeed much more vital than it was in the Dark Project, and that is why these games were like the best of the best. Opposite that, of Tenchu Stealth Assassins or Metal Gear Solid, those games didn't really utilize that type of sound mechanic, but it's the reason why the original Thief games were so well loved, not because of the story of mechanical wise of its sound quality, but it was the fact of how these games were able to differentiate themselves between. It was the soundscape is what made these games even more impressive. And not only that, it was indeed the fact that this game, the Metal Age, was more heavily emphasized to where you really had to be more careful with the sound mechanic than from the first one. The first one actually did a magnificent job with its sound mechanic quality and its level structure and its systems. But that's where Thief 2 to Metal Age was able to do as well and provide that. And it was astounding that there is a system or mechanic called the light bar. The light bar is actually one of the most influential ways of being able to go into light, into darkness. And that's one of the greatest things of what made these games even more successful. Because what I do know when it came to the original Thief game, the Dark Project, and then along with Thief 2 the Metal Age, is that these games were actually in developmental hell for a while, and until they were actually able to be solvent enough to make these games to have them be more profitable and being able to sell. And so they had so many problems of trying to get these games out, but once these games were able to finally come out, they were critically acclaimed. It was the fact that what they were able to pull off with this game, and what they were able to pull off in the first one when it came to its AI. For what I understand with the AI from the first one into the second one, they literally had to make a whole entire new AI script in order to make the AI more responsive to that of Garrett, because obviously we already know who Garrett is. He is a master thief. He's a renowned master thief. And that is why he's far more effective in the first one. He's far more effective in the second one, and even greater, I would say, in Thief Deadly Shadows. But what I would say, I think, when it came to Deadly Shadows, that one was it was a little dumbed down a little bit from its sound mechanics, but the sound mechanics in the third one were still emphasized enough. But that's where the first one and the second one were heavily involved, and it was the fact that these games are indeed based on evasion rather than being caught. And if you're being caught, you literally had to be able to provide yourself to be able to go into that type of combat scenario. But that's where these games are far more effective when it comes to not being seen and being able to be that master thief. And it's the reason why these games are far loved from a lot of people, including myself. And it's greatly appreciated to know why Looking Glass Studios, now defunct by the way, obviously, but it's the reason why these games were utterly successful. And it's the reason why I love these games in general. And it's like I was mentioning in my Thief 2014 video, I want to see these games make a comeback. Whether if they don't like provide, I'm hoping that if they do make a comeback with these original games, possibly maybe an HD remastered collection for PC and for consoles, that would be utterly amazing. But point being, I don't think that's going to happen though because of how old these games are. One thing I will say is that this game, from its first one to the second one and Deadly Shadows, is that these games did not age very well, especially the first two on PC. But overall, these games are still fantastic. It's the feng shui of these games in general and why these games are fairly unique of what I've always previously mentioned. And it's fantastic with its level design, the systems of being able to go around and blackjack people and putting them to sleep and hiding them and not being found. I love that mechanic and it's immersive. And that's why these games were so heavily immersive though too. And that's why these games, when it came to Thief Deadly Shadows and Thief 2 the Metal Age and Thief the Dark Project, is that these games are known as immersive sims. And that is why I think that these games are so great. It's the fact that these games are not immersion breaking. And it's the reason why I think that these games will always they will go down in history, and they already have been. And it's fascinating as to why these games were the pinnacle of their time and of the era of gaming over more than just a decade. And it's astounding. And it's the fact that what Thief the Dark Project is able to utilize from its core mechanic systems, its level design, its sound design as well. And it's very, like I said, it's very much emphasized into 2, and it's a little bit less emphasized in 3, which is Deadly Shadows. But it's still there. The emphasis is still there for 3. But I think what really makes these games so utterly amazing as well, it's that all these 3 games, or these original Thief games, they provide a good calm of certainty to why playing as a master thief is rewarding. And what makes these games even greater is that there's a high risk and high reward system in this game. It was in the first one, the second one, and even the third one. But that is why I'm saying when it comes to Thief the Dark Project or Thief 2 the Metal Age or Thief Deadly Shadows, these games were amazing, exquisite. They were eye candy to the unknowing eye. And it's the reason why these games were also very heavily popular. And it was the fact that from story to story to story, from 1, 2, and 3, they all coincided with each other. And that is why Thief Deadly Shadows, like I said, it was the pinnacle of the evolution of stealth gaming, because initially everyone thought that this game wasn't going to sell, the first one, and yet it did. And it was the fact of what the mechanic of what that game was able to provide and to utilize. Like I said, it was the sound quality systems and how sound was actually able to reverberate from a certain type of hallway, whether if it was marble or glass or some sort of thing, that would make a high-pitched noise, and that sound would reverberate around that specific area, and it will alert the guards. That is what made these games the best of its time, the best quality of these games in general. And I think that is why these games are so heavily influenced and why they were so nostalgic. And I would say, if I would have to say, be so blunt, is that these games are by far the best stealth games I have ever played, amongst from Tenchu Stealth Assassins from PS1 or from, Metal Gear Solid or any other games I could possibly think of in the stealth genre. But even then, I really think that the original Thief games they're just simply amazing. It really brings some of that nostalgia back factor to it. But that is what makes the fun factor of these games. And being able to go around certain types of level structures and the level systems and the concepts are simply still fascinating in Thief 2: The Metal Age. And it goes to show you as to why Looking Glass Studios did such an excellent job in this franchise. I really think that Looking Glass Studios did a fantastic job with Thief: The Dark Project. They did an amazing job with Thief 2: The Metal Age. And so when Thief 3 or Thief Deadly Shadows came out, that game was actually picked up by Ion Storm, which were another subsidiary company to that of, I believe it was Eidos Interactive. They were not subsidiary to that of Looking Glass Studios. But however, I still think that Thief Deadly Shadows is still a remarkable game to its own usual concept design and its combat aesthetics and mechanics. But overall, I think what really made Thief Deadly Shadows so great though too is because it was the foundation of what made the first two Thief games so special. It was the immersion there. It was the soundscape. It was everything what these games were able to provide and provide them to the utmost of why they were so popular. And it's amazing. So all I can say is this. If you really want to go back and replay these games, I do highly recommend playing these games overall. I think that these games are simply the best, even though that maybe the first two have not aged all that well. Possibly maybe Thief Deadly Shadows on PC. But I mean, Thief Deadly Shadows did release on Xbox, original Xbox, and on PC. But overall, I still think that this series it has gone down in history. It's one of the best series of stealth games I have ever played. And to this day, I still look back and as to why these games were so good and as to why these games did an amazing job with its environmental storytelling and with some really cool NPC characteristics and how they were able to be thoroughly involved within the universe of Thief. And it just goes greatly to show you of how passionate Looking Glass Studios was before they went defunct back in 2002, if I remember correctly. And so I really think that when it comes to the original Thief franchise, I really think that if they were to make another game other than the faltered one of Thief 2014, I think there is a chance that this series could come back as a whole, or maybe do a complete reboot and try to work it from the ground up for what they were able to initially to do in the original franchise, especially from 1 and 2 with the sound mechanic core systems. And being able to provide that type of system in the reboot, if they were to do that, I think that's the most important thing, is what made the original franchise so great. And so I'm just saying, I'm really hoping that the company that will eventually possibly maybe make a reboot knows what they're doing. I want them to be passionate as to what Looking Glass Studios was able to be passionate about while making the first two games. And so all I can say is that if you really want to truly replay these games, like I said, I do highly recommend replaying them. I think they're fantastic. It's thoroughly one of the best trilogy I've ever played from Metal Gear Solid. And it's amazing what this series was able to use or to do and utilize its systems and the gameplay mechanics and the quality of these games. It's utterly amazing. So one thing I would really like to put in here though too is that back in 2004, they were actually able to do a Thief 2X Shadows of the Metal Age, which was really highly popular as well. But anyways, that's all I can say.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? And today I'm going to be talking about Thief Deadly Shadows. I actually did a video on this not too long ago. I believe it was as of last year. And I delved a little bit I did a little bit of a deep dive on this video of this game and discussing some of the mechanics and what I really truly thought about this game in general. But I'm actually going to be doing a redux, as it were, a little bit here because I really want to talk about this game in so many different types of aspects and the concept of this game. Thief Deadly Shadows was released in May 25th, 2004, and it was pretty close to the release of Doom 3 back on the original Xbox as well. And the reason why I really want to talk about this game again, actually, is because this is actually indeed one of my favorite stealth games of all time, opposite that of, Thief the Dark Project and Thief 2 The Metal Age and, the Metal Gear Solids and Tenchu Stealth Assassins back in the PS1 days. But heretofore, the reason why for this is because I feel like that this game is it's kind of like a little bit of an underrated gem from that of the original 2 back on PC because while this game was critically acclaimed to a certain degree from so many different types of outlets, which was IGN, Kotaku, Polygon, Game Informer, or vice versa, but heretofore, I really think that when it comes to Thief the Deadly Shadows, excuse me, is that, I really like the way how this game has a risk and reward system. There's so many games that have this type of concept to it, and it's the fact that this game takes place in a Victorian steampunkish setting. And it's the reason why I love the original 2 back on PC, and it's the reason why I love stealth games in general, is because there's always a risk and reward involvement when it comes to these types of games. I really think when it comes to most games out there that doesn't have much of a risk and reward, maybe sometimes they do, whether if it's a first person shooter or whether if it's like any other type of genre, whether if it's an RPG like Final Fantasy. But I think when it comes to stealth games in general, I think the Thief games and Metal Gear and Tenchu and all that kind of stuff, there's always going to be a risk and reward. Now, what I really want to discuss about here, though, too, is that this game is more based on evasion rather than being noticed. And I think the reason why this game is so well loved, even by me, is because not just because I played the original 2 on PC, which were absolutely fascinating. I absolutely loved them. But I think Thief Deadly Shadows it's one of those games to where it was far more unique in a certain type of way and conceptual way from the originals. I think when it came to the originals, it was its level structure and its level systems and, being able to progress certain types of areas by, utilizing going out alternate different type of pathways. And Thief Deadly Shadows was able to do that pretty well. I think that Thief Deadly Shadows had a very unique progression system from the originals, because their progression system in the originals were in fact mission based. While Thief Deadly Shadows is part of the mission based structure, they are always going to bring you to different types of areas within the game. Much like the original titles, they brought you to certain different types of areas as well. But what Thief Deadly Shadows does when it comes to its leveling structure, like the Kershak Citadel, you have to get the throne from there, right? You have to go to the Wheelstrom Museum, which is pretty close to the end of the game, to get the several artifacts. And that's where I really loved about Thief Deadly Shadows, though. It was the mechanics of this game that was very influential from what the original was able to do. And I think that's where this game really does a really good job of showing off each of these structures of the game individually. And it's the visual concept. I've always debated this, or I've always talked about when it comes to visual appealing things when it comes to video games. Whether if it's video games or movies, but video games has always been the core mechanic for me when it comes to playing a video game, because I've always been really good when it comes to visuals. I think Thief Deadly Shadows, it actually aged a little bit better than I think than from the original 2, because while this game was on the original Xbox or on PC, is that it was the fact that what this game was able to do, it had a better engine. Not like a creation engine from like Skyrim or Oblivion or whatnot, but Thief Deadly Shadows I forgot what kind of engine that it used, but Ion Storm was the company that actually made this game. But Looking Glass, which is now a defunct studio that made the original games before this game. And that's why I think Deadly Shadows, it takes a lot of implementation from what the original 2 were able to do, in terms of the style of gameplay. There are no different. You can't do any like creation or anything, which is nice because usually when you play a stealth game, specifically like in Skyrim or in Oblivion, you have that character creation, right? You can do that type of mode, but you can't do that when it comes to Thief games because Thief has always been the motivation. It's always been the structure of being that master thief known as Garrett. And I think that's another reason why I love this series as a whole, not just because of a stealth game. It's the reason what this game was able to pertain and how to utilize the thief system in this game. And what makes this game even more important is the fact that it uses a light gem. The light gem is actually able to implement, light and shadow movements. You have to be when you're in stealth mode, you have to basically use the shadows more appropriately, because you can use the shadows at your disposal more so because, what they were able to do with the engine of this game is that, each type of area within the game, when there are shadows, that shadow is actually able to have that shadow effect from different types of structures in the game, like walls or lighting effects, and bounce, and those lighting effects are able to bounce off certain types of objects and creating that shadow effect. They were actually able to utilize the engine for this game to do so, which is really cool. And that's one of the greatest things what I really loved about not just from the originals, but it was the fact of what Thief Deadly Shadows was actually able to do. And it's the reason why I think Thief Deadly Shadows did a much better job in so many types of ways other than what the originals were able to do and what this game was capable of. Because mind you got to think about it this way, even though that this game was released in 2004, it was the fact that this game is not as old as it is pretty old as that of the original too, because Thief Deadly Shadows came out in 2004, like I previously mentioned, but Metal Age came out in 2002, 2001, excuse me. And then Thief the Dark Project came out, I believe it was 1998 or 1999, but it just goes to show you of how far a game series like this can go. And what I will say is that Thief the Dark Project did not age very well, even though that its core systems and the leveling structure of each of the levels in the Dark Project were so absolutely amazing. I love the way how it was able to, for example, when you had a mission in the first one to where you had like of the structure of the level, it was like in a kaleidoscope type of way or visual aesthetic. It was dope. It was awesome. And that's one thing I think the original Thief, the Dark Project, was able to do very well, which was its level design and its systems. However, when it came to Thief 2, the Metal Age, it didn't have that. It did have that type of feel to it from the original. But Thief Deadly Shadows, this game, other than it being a stealth game as it is, it's the fact that this game takes place, I believe, I don't know how many years it takes place after the first two, but it's still a direct sequel. It's not a reboot or anything. It's not. I think a lot of people are saying that this game was a reboot to that of the original two. It's really not, because if you think about it, if it was a reboot, then you would play a totally entirely different character, right? Garrett is the original character from the very first two games, so this is a sequel. And so I really think what makes Thief Deadly Shadows so different, other than it being its still core mechanic systems of being a stealth game and stealing to be that Robin Hood type of thing, having money to yourself or give it to someone else, but it really doesn't give you that type of aspect or concept to it. But point being, this game just does. I love the visual appealing aesthetic to this game, which is really what makes me more breathtaking to a game like this, other than it being an old school title. But here's the thing, I'm going to thoroughly admit something here real quick. I'm a huge nostalgia fan. I've always been that way when it comes to gaming in general, but I'm not saying I don't like the new stuff the way you have today. It's just the fact that when it comes to old school, like Thief, Metal Gear Solid, all these games from back in the previous years, it's astounding of that these games were able to achieve a much better visual fidelity and the engines that these games provide to run on. And I just think that this game is just absolutely amazing. One thing I will say is that Thief Deadly Shadows is based on the story of the fourth glyph. That's all I will say, and because I don't want to spoil it. I know a lot of people have already played this game, but other than that, there is a level in this game I really want to talk about here though too. It's called the Shellbridge Cradle. It's one of the most pinnacle and one of the most interesting levels I've ever seen in a game in gaming history. I'm sure that there are other games that when it comes to stealth games, they do have some memorable moments. They do have memorable levels, much like I would say maybe Thief 2 The Metal Age or Thief the Dark Project. But Thief Deadly Shadows shows off the Shellbridge Cradle mission in this game where it's eerie, it's dark, it's foreboding, it's broody, but that was the core mechanic of that level. And that's one of the things what I greatly appreciated about this game. And it's the fact that what this game was able to actually to do, like showing off a very dark conceptual design of a level like the Shellbridge Cradle. Because honestly, I don't think I've ever seen any other type of game. Actually, no, that's a little bit of a lie, because there is one game I do remember. It was called The Suffering. And that game, or I think it was Condemned Origins as well, those two games were pretty memorable in certain types of ways because they did have those games were utterly brutal, but there were aspects and concepts to where there were some levels in those games that were horrifically terrifying. But that's where the Shellbridge Cradle was able to provide that as well from Thief Deadly Shadows. And I think that's where I really loved about this game as well. And it just goes to show you of what a company is able to utilize the systems of showing off what a level can do to make you scared. And what Condemned Origins was able to do, what The Suffering was able to do. Or like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, or any other game that has that type of horror aspect to it. It's phenomenal. And so I think that's why I think the Shellbridge Cradle, especially in a Thief game like Deadly Shadows, it's amazing. I have never seen a level that is so well put together, and its level design systems, it's astounding. And so what I will say is that I actually highly recommend this series, really, because of the fact that this series as a whole is very highly popular. I'm sure a lot of people still play it to this day in 2024, because you got to understand is that these games were not just of the pinnacle of stealth game or stealth genre as a whole. It was the fact that what these games were able to really do and initialize a whole new set of gameplay style, which is stealth, which is based on evasion rather than being noticed. And that's basically what the core gameplay mechanics are when it comes to Thief Deadly Shadows, Thief the Dark Project, and Thief 2 The Metal Age. And I think that's why I think this series is absolutely phenomenal. I have never had so much fun in a game much like Thief Deadly Shadows or the original two Thieves. And I would love to see games like this come back. And I want to put this here real quick as I may. I played Thief 2014. I played it through twice. And I'm going to say one thing. That game was utterly atrocious. And the character that did the voiceover for Garrett, his name is Romano Orzari. He actually plays Ezio Father in Assassin's Creed Lineage, which was a live movie on YouTube. You can watch it over there. If you played AC2, he also played the father in that game as well, the game especially. But other than that, Thief 2014, it wasn't. It was just terrible. I'm sorry to say it, because it did not bring any of the core factors of what the original series was able to do. While it did retain a little bit of the evasion and not being noticed. But to me personally, that game dumbed it down so badly, it just didn't work. And I think that's why one of the reasons why that game faltered. A lot of people actually hated that game. It was not critically acclaimed. It was heavily criticized. There were no quest markers involved in the original games. You literally had to figure a lot of things out on your own. While Thief 2014 did not initialize that, it did not utilize that type of system from the original games. And I think that's another reason why Thief 2014 faltered. And it's a shame. But other than that, Thief Deadly Shadows shows off amazing visual fidelity of its systems, of showing off different types of lighting structure and bringing it to life to a game like this, much like of an older title. But that's where I say that, this game, it's the reason why I think when it comes to nostalgia gaming like Thief Deadly Shadows or the original series or like Metal Gear Solid or Tenchu, you got to understand that these games are they might have been the most important games in gaming history. But this is what I'm saying. These games are not being made anymore. And it's the reason why I like making these types of videos is because I share my passion. I share my sympathy as to why I think that these games are just so utterly amazing. And like I said, I want to see games like this again. While I do believe that we might not get these anymore, but it would be nice. It's just that it just goes to show you that the video game industry has changed very much so for more than 10 years. And so all I can say is this. If you really want to provide yourself a good sense of certainty and going back to nostalgia gaming, I do highly recommend playing the original Thief games from 1 to 2 to 3, which is Deadly Shadows.
Kept you waiting, huh? Anyways, to much further ado, we're going to be talking about Thief 2014. And there is one thing in particular I would really like to say before we dive right into this last video of my original Thief retrospect, from the originals to that of Thief 2014. Yep, I had to say it. This game still sucks. And the reason why I say this is because I recently went back to this game not too long ago, and it was the fact that why this game is so bad. It was the writing, it was the story overall. The gameplay still felt like that of the original Thief games, but having a different voice actor and really did not provide this type of the early sentiment of what Steven Russell was able to provide with this tonality of his voice for Garrett in the original Thief games. And I think that's where this game also faltered. I mean, a lot of people really did not like Thief 2014 because of Steven Russell not coming back to his true form, playing as Garrett. But I think the reason why they did that, made this choice of having Romano Azari doing the voice, which was Ezio Auditore's father in AC2 the game and in the AC2 lineage before the AC2 release of that game itself. He did a pretty good job, but overall, I still think that Roman Azari, I don't think he was the best option, and so it's one of the reasons why I think that this game also faltered. But the reason why this game really faltered is because not just of what I previously mentioned about the old version of Garrett by Steven Russell of doing the voice. It was the fact that what this game was actually able to pertain and what it did not utilize as to what the original franchise was able to do. It was the fact that it was the soundscape quality and mechanic what the original series was able to provide. It was the what I mean by that, the soundscape in the original series, however, was able to utilize the sound structure from, if you're walking on a tile, it's going to make a high-pitched noise. If you're walking on a rug, it's going to be quiet, right? And that's where Thief 2014, they dumbed it down so much in this game. It was actually basically non-existent, and it really pissed me off to no end. And it's the reason why I think that this game also faltered itself. While this game still does retain some of its fidelity of the structure of the game itself by playing as a master thief, but I would say I think the old school versions is what made those games utterly important. From Thief the Dark Project, Thief 2 the Metal Age, and Thief Deadly Shadows, Thief 2014 to me just does not fit that category, even though Thief 2014 just does play in a first-person perspective. But it's the reason why this game faltered in so many ways as well. It was, like I said, it's not because of the story. It's not because of playing that Master Thief. It was the fact that I think it was the overall structure of this game is what made this game non-memorable. It was unforgettable. And what made the original series was able to provide and utilize those sound mechanic systems and being that Master Thief, and while you still retain some of that factor in Thief 2014, but at the same time, it didn't feel that way. And that's why I'm saying Thief 2014, to me, to this day still, doesn't exist anymore in my brain. Because I'm telling you, I was so disappointed in this game after my first playthrough, and I'm just like, why am I, and just the other day when I started playing this again, why am I replaying this again? Well, I kind of come to find out the reason why I was replaying this again is because I wanted to finish up my original Thief perspective to that of Thief 2014. And I think that's why I think this game, I can understand why they made this game too, is that they really wanted to bring and harken back to what the original franchise was able to do. With its amazing gameplay storytelling, along with the environmental storytelling, the main story itself with Garrett and the Keepers and the Hammerites and the first three and the Pagans and all, I mean everything of what made those original games so good and so well loved. And here in Thief 2014, like I said again, this game just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the same category as what the original franchise was able to pertain and use and utilize. And everything in this game was totally dumbed down. It was disheartening. It was disapproving. It was insulting to my intelligence because I love the original franchise from the first one to the second one and to the third one. And while you still have the retainment of bringing some old school elements back, like the first person perspective, other than in Thief Deadly Shadows, you could switch between third person and first person. That's the only thing that Thief 2014 was able to provide. And the only thing that it also did provide was the utilization of tools. You have your bow, you have your blackjack, but it still didn't feel the same. And I think that's where this game also faltered in that type of category as well. And so all I can say is this. If you really want to play a Thief game, I do highly recommend playing the originals rather than Thief 2014. If you really want to play this game for the very first time and get a manner of different perspective on this game and why you truly think possibly that this game might be good to you. But to me, it's not good at all. And it's the reason why I will always go back to the original series. But anyway, so much further ado. Thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciated. Any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. And you guys have a good rest of your week.